Hi everyone! Welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing a book haul and I'm very excited because I have several books here that I've not only picked up myself but have been sent. So lots of anticipated releases on this list. Let's get right into it. So we'll start with a couple of books I bought myself as sequels to some series I've started. The first being The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty, which is the last book in the Devabad trilogy. Look at that stunning cover. I love this cover so much. I do want to read this as soon as possible. This was a book that my patrons and I had read as part of our book club in the Patreon. If you're interested in joining, I'll link all the information for it down below. We all read The City of Brass and we all really enjoyed it, so we decided to continue on with the rest of the series and buddy read the rest of the series. And The Empire of Gold is the last book. So lots happened at the end of the second book, which makes me really excited to jump into this third one. So hopefully I have time soon to get to that one. The next book I have is The Poison Song by Jen Williams. This is another one that I read The Ninth Reign a couple months ago and really enjoyed it. It's not a favorite, but I thought the world was so unique, so different, and I really want to finish out the series. The second book was good. The ending of the second book was pretty wild, so I am excited to get to The Poison Song. And again, I do plan on prioritizing this soon. I really don't want to let too much time pass in between these books in series, because if I do, I will forget so much of them and then I'll have to reread them, and I don't have time to reread right now, so I really want to get to this soon. Those are the two sequels that I bought. I also was sent a couple of sequels, the first being Engines of Chaos by R.S. Ford, which was so kindly sent to me by Orbit, and this is one where Engines of Empire has been so high on my TBR priority list that I just have a feeling I'm going to absolutely love it and immediately want to dive into the second book. So I'm so glad now that I have the sequel to go ahead and start as soon as I finish that first one. The way Elle from Elliot Brooks talks about Engines of Empire just has me convinced I'm going to love it. So I can't wait to get into this series, and hopefully I can also shout about it from the rooftops and get more people to read it because it sounds incredible. I can't wait. And then I was also sent The Bone Shard War by Andrea Stewart, which I actually just finished last night, so I have some fresh thoughts, but this is the third and final book in the Drowning Empire trilogy. And the first book, The Bone Shard Daughter, is one of my favorites of all time. I love that book so much. I was very excited to get the concluding book in that trilogy. And I'll save my thoughts. This is not a wrap up. I'll save my thoughts for my wrap up, but The Bone Shard War. It's good. You should definitely check out the first book. It's really good. Right, now let's talk about some special editions, and then we'll leave off this book haul with books I was sent. So the first special edition I have is Alone with You in the Ether by Olivia Blake, and this is the author of The Atlas Six, which I recently read and have such conflicted feelings on. Oh my goodness, I was so confused by my feelings on that book. But Alone with You in the Ether, as far as I'm aware, is actually more of a contemporary romance, I think. I don't think that this is fantasy. Yeah, it's a contemporary love story. Reagan and Aldo allow us to explore the nature of love, what it means to be unwell, and how to face the fractures of ourselves and still love as if we're not broken. And I've heard incredible things about this book. People seem to be loving it, and it's not very long. And this edition with the little beehive sprayed edges is so gorgeous. It is the Fairy Loot edition. I'm obsessed. So I was super excited to finally get this in the mail, and underneath the dust jacket you can see it has the gold foiling. So it's a gorgeous book. I can't wait to read it. I've heard amazing things. So when I need a break from fantasy, this is what I will pick up. I also have the April book that was a part of the Fairy Loot adult subscription, and that is In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune. This is the exclusive cover from Fairy Loot. It is quite different than the original cover, and I really love it. I love the original cover, but this one's really beautiful too, and the sprayed edges are just so stunning that I'm very excited to have this edition. The end papers are so beautiful as well. Let me show you. And then there is the naked hardcover. So really, really beautiful book. Very excited to add this to the collection, and I'm really excited to read this. This was one of my most anticipated releases this year because I love House in the Cerulean Sea so much. So I'm really excited to get to that one. Another special edition I was so kindly sent by Elle. Thank you so much, because she had an extra edition. So I have the Waterstones edition of Song of Silver Flame Like Night by Amelia Winsau with the really fun orange sprayed edges. I love this pop of orange. It's so pretty. So I'm really excited to get to this one. Amelia Winsau also wrote Blood Heir, which is another YA fantasy book and an entire trilogy. And I really liked that first book. I really liked her writing style. So I'm very excited to check out something else by this author. And this cover is just so beautiful. I feel like one of the few who prefer the UK cover over the US cover. I just think the colors in this cover are so beautiful. So very excited to check this one out for sure. Thank you so much, Elle. Thank you. And then the last special edition I have is once again from Fairy Loot. I think because I'm a Fairy Loot subscriber and I get the early access to their editions, that is just kind of my default go-to place for special editions, and the prices aren't outrageous, so I always just grab the special editions of books that I think I'm gonna love, and this is one I've heard such amazing things about. It's called The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston, and this is one that I think is also more of a contemporary romance story, but with a magical realism twist, because I think the two main characters might be dead. So it says, I began to realize that love wasn't dead, but it wasn't forever either. It was something in between, a moment in time where two people existed at the exact same moment in the exact same place in the universe. Love wasn't a whisper in the quiet night. It was a yelp into the void, screaming that you were here. So I love that. So I'm really excited to check this out. Again, in between all of my chunky fantasy books, this will be a good one to go to. And this edition has these edges, which might be my favorite sprayed edges. I love them so much. I think they're so cute. And then actually underneath the dust jacket is gorgeous as well. I love this edition so much. It's so pretty. So very excited to add this to the collection. All right, and now let's get into some books I was so kindly sent by publishers. So the first one is one of my most anticipated releases of the year, Witch King by Martha Wells. So this is one that I feel like a lot of folks in the fantasy community have really been anticipating. I think it is actually a standalone, which is so nice. It's very refreshing to get a standalone in fantasy. If it becomes a series, I would not be surprised. But I think right now it's a standalone. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Martha Wells wrote the Murderbot Diaries, and I am not a huge Murderbot fan. I read All Systems Red, didn't love it, wasn't for me, but I've never read any of her fantasy stuff. So I'm curious to see if Martha Wells writing fantasy works better for me. And this one just sounded so good. It says, it draws together Martha Wells' signature ability to create characters we adore and identify with, along with breathtaking action and adventure, and the wit and charm we've come to expect. So we'll see. I'm really excited. I think that this is getting released this month, right at the end of the month. So would love to read it soon and hopefully get a review out for you so that you know if, you're interested in picking it up. I also received The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren. I love Christina Lauren. So many of their books I've loved so much. others not as much. But The True Love Experiment sounds like it's one that I'm going to love. It has a really cute premise. It says sparks fly when a romance novelist and a documentary filmmaker join forces to craft the perfect Hollywood love story, but only if they can keep the chemistry between them from taking the whole thing off script. So very excited to check this one out. Again, I'm glad to have these types of romance stories in between some larger fantasy books, especially since I have a baby due soon and probably won't be able to focus as much on these epic fantasy books. I have some romance to escape into, so that might be a perfect time for me to read all of these. I was also sent Godkiller by Hannah Kaner, and this one I think came out in the UK earlier this year already, so I think it's being released by Harper Voyager later this year, but I have heard incredible things about this book. It seems like so many people have been loving this debut, and I am so excited to check it out. It's actually quite short, and I do think it is the first book in a series, but with it being so short, I'm like so curious how it can pack such a punch. I appreciate that. As someone who reads a lot of fantasy, a lot of them can be very long. So I love when one comes up that's shorter and apparently still packs quite the punch. So very excited to check this one out and see what all the hype is about. I also received the embroidered book by Kate Hartfield. This cover is so striking. I love that. This one says, it is about power is not something you are given, power is something you take. When you are a woman, it is a little more difficult, that's all. 1768, Charlotte, daughter of the Habsburg Empress, arrives in Naples to marry a man she has never met. Her sister Antoine is sent to France, and in the mirrored corridors of Versailles, they rename her Marie Antoinette. The sisters are alone, but they are not powerless. When they were only children, they discovered a book of spells, spells that work with dark and unpredictable consequences. In a time of vicious court politics, of discovery and dizzying change, they used the book to take control of their lives. But every spell requires a sacrifice, and as love between the sisters turns to rivalry, they will send Europe spiraling into revolution. Brimming with romance, betrayal, and enchantment, the embroidered book reimagines a dazzling period of history as you have never seen it before. So it sounds really interesting to me. It's taking this historical time period that I'm very interested in learning more about and putting kind of this magic realism twist on it. So very excited to check this one out. It's a little bit outside of my normal comfort zone, but it just had such an interesting premise that I was so intrigued by it and had to check it out. Also have Gods of the Wordwood by R.J. Barker. Now, I have read R.J. Barker before. I tried reading The Bone Ships and wasn't a huge fan of that one. But to be fair, I'm not a huge fan of seafaring fantasy in general. So I feel like I want to give R.J. Barker another shot, and this one had such a cool premise. It says, ours is a land of many gods, and we are a people with the ability to pick the worst of them. Kahan is, I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm so sorry. Kahan is known as the Forester, a man who can navigate the dangerous wood edge like no one else. But once he was more. Once he belonged to the god of fire. Udini, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce these names. Udini serves the goddess of the lost, a keeper of the small and helpless. When Udini needs to venture into Woodedge to find a lost child, she asks Kahan to be her guide. But in a land where territory is won and lost for uncaring gods, where the woods are teeming with monsters, Kahan will need to choose the forest or the fire, and his choice will have consequences for his entire world. So it's a world of gods and prophecies, which is something I always love. I love fantasy worlds that focus a lot on gods and these types of prophecies. So I'm very intrigued by this, and I think if I were to like R.J. Barker, it should be with a book like this. So I'm hoping that this one works out better for me. The next book I have is The Endless Vessel by Charles Sewell. So this is an author I've read 2 books from previously and loved the first book I read by him, which was The Oracle Year. And I really enjoyed the second one I read called Anyone. So he does these types of sci-fi, like very soft sci-fi thriller novels. And this one sounded so intriguing. It says, a few years from now, in a world similar to ours, there exists a depression plague that people refer to simply as the Gray. No one can predict whom it will afflict or how, but once infected, there's no coming back. A young Hong Kong-based scientist, Lily Barnes, is trying to maintain her inner light in an increasingly dark world. The human race is dwindling, and people fighting to push forward are increasingly rare. One day, Lily comes across something that seems to be addressing her directly, calling to her, asking her to follow a path to whatever lies at its ends. Is this the endless vessel to happiness? She leaves her life behind and sets out through time and space to find out. From its opening, heart-stopping scene in the present day at the Louvre in Paris, through the earthly meetings between Lily and her loved ones, past and present, to a shocking and satisfying conclusion in a truly enchanted forest, Charles Soule has channeled history, science, and drama to create a story for the ages, a story of hope and love and possibility. This is a novel you will not soon forget. So it sounds like it kind of tackles themes that remind me a lot of the Midnight Library by Matt Haig, and that's one that I thought was okay, but didn't quite hit for me, so I'm hoping that this one actually ends up being more for me than the Midnight Library was, because I love the idea of tackling these types of themes and having this type of message. So I'm very curious to check this one out. I have already started it. I'm not too far into it yet, enough to have any thoughts, but I am super excited to check it out, and hopefully I love it as much as I've loved his other books. The last two books I was sent are self-published, and they were so kindly sent to me by the author. The first being Ascendant by Michael R. Miller. This is Songs of Chaos, Book 1. And then I also received Unbound, which is Book 2 in the same series. These are gorgeous. The hardcover is printed directly on the book itself, the art, so you don't have any dust jacket. The quality is incredible. I am so impressed with the quality of this book. I have heard really good things. I've heard if you like Aragon, then this is a story that you'll really like. It sounds like it's kind of a young adult type novel, but it could appeal to any age. Like, it doesn't have to be categorized specifically as young adult. So I've been very curious to check this out. I've seen Petrick talk a little bit about this series on his channel, so I've been very curious to check this one out, and it just sounded so good. The covers are absolutely stunning. I really like Aragon. I really like dragons. I mean, how can you go wrong? Thank you so much to the author for sending these gorgeous copies to me. I'm so excited to add these to my collection. And then I have one last book that I did purchase, and it is The Helm of Midnight by Marina Lowstetter. This is one that my patrons selected for me to read for this month, so I am hoping to have time to get to it this month. If I don't, I'll absolutely read it next month, first thing. The Helm of Midnight, I've heard, is a fantasy horror novel, and I have not, I think, read anything that's properly fantasy horror. I've read things that are fantasy that have horror elements in them, but not full-on fantasy horror. So I'm very curious to check this one out because I love horror books and I love fantasy books, and I want to see if fantasy horror is going to be something I absolutely adore. I have a feeling it will be. I've heard great things about this series, so I'm very excited to check this out, and it should be very soon that I read this. Hopefully it'll be right after I finish the current book I'm reading. That is this book haul. Did you see any books in here that I hauled that you've read before, and do you have any thoughts on them? Let me know in the comments down below. And then what is one book that you've hauled recently that you are most excited to get to? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to, and if you want more information about exclusive content from me and joining a fantasy book club and suggesting video ideas and books for me to read, then you can check out the Patreon in the description box down below for some more information. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye!